if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you've heard some challenging stories, but this might be one of the first times that I feel like I have to put a listener discretion advised kind of warning here. I only say that because my wife Cordy was listening to this and she only got like 30 minutes into it and she had to take a break because it was just a lot heavier than she bargained for when she was, throwing in an AirPod to do dishes the other night. So I'm David. You're listening to the Plant Medicine for PTSD podcast. And as usual, I made my buddy cry during the recording of this episode. So in this one, I'm joined by my new friend, Paul Nootbaar, who has honestly had such a fucking crazy life. We barely scratched the surface of it in this episode. I'm recording this intro after the fact where I've already recorded round two with him, which will be more about his healing journey. And even there, we only scratched the surface of it. I feel like we would need a 19-part podcast series to actually go through everything. But Paul's a really incredible person because he's had such a, call it colorful past, such a challenging upbringing, from losing his mother at a very young age to being in and out of the foster care system, mostly in the foster care system and juvenile detention, and making his way back finally to his family, getting out of the system, and then being at a loss of how am I supposed to be a normal fucking kid after all of these experiences. And obviously, that led him down a pretty bad path later in life that he ultimately clawed his way out from to start a family, kind of become a law abiding citizen again, had a family, had a son. And it wasn't until he had his own son that all of these memories from his childhood came flooding back. And he started having these flashbacks, these memories from when he was a kid, and remembering all of these truly traumatic things that he went through as a kid ultimately led him to feeling suicidal as an adult and being convinced, as I've heard so many times before, being convinced that his family would be better off without him somehow. And thank God, through complete random chance, he got set up with an MDMA assisted therapist. And that catapulted him onto the healing journey that he's on now, and ultimately into being a facilitator of that medicine himself. And not in the standard fucking hippie bullshit white guy with dreads method of, having one medicine experience of being like, ah, yes, God has called me forth to provide this medicine to people. But actually, Paul put in the work on himself and then put in the work to learn how to do this the right way. So he's really a gold mine of experience and information. And I'm really grateful that he's in our orbit now and he's someone I can call a friend. So let's maybe leave it there. Just as a little forewarning, in this episode, I had a lot of issues with my power going in and out, and it caused some audio quality issues a little bit later on. So hopefully you can power through any difficulties there. I tried to stitch things together seamlessly, but again, the audio is a little bit screwed up at one point. So try not to let that detract from the quality of this incredible tale that Paul is going to share with us. So without further ado, let's get into it. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the other side. So we were talking yesterday about what we do and do not want to talk about here. And you said the fatherhood was kind of one of the things that you don't often get a chance to talk too much about. So I want to make sure that that's something that we
Yeah,
hit
for
on.
sure.
But maybe, before that, I'll give a little bit of an introduction to who you are and everything, but I still am just getting to know you. So can you tell our fine listeners just like 30-second bio? Like, who are you? What do you do right now?
Thir-
And we'll talk about how you came to be there, but what are you up to these days?
30-second bio. So, my name's Paul Nootbaar. I'm 39 years old and a father of two. I have a son, Bodie. He's 4 years old, and a daughter, Juniper, who's two. They'll both be 3 and 5 in February. Um, Currently, career wise, I'm a plumbing contractor by trade, and then trauma coach also by trade now, but it's kind of like in this weird shift of like kind of phasing out of plumbing and trying to do this trauma work full time and facilitate with psychedelic medicines, MDMA and psilocybin.
So we'll talk all about how you kind of got onto that path. But what was the actual training that you did to be a
Oh,
facilitator? Because you like studied it, you took it seriously, you got all kinds of certifications and
so
stuff,
there's
right?
no like actual like legitimate certifications for it. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can take like a training course and go through it, and they'll give you a certification, but it doesn't necessarily hold weight where I live, right?
Doesn't mean
So
anything.
it's
No,
kind of a bummer
no.
story because I think what we talked about when we initially jumped on the line is integrity being kind of a big factor in this realm of medicine work that is lacking big time. And I trained under this guy. His name's Jonathan Robinson, and he's been working with MDMA in the therapeutic world since like the 80s. Did his master's thesis on MDMA and post traumatic stress. Um, I think in like the late 80s, early 90s. Um, and like had all this, was friends with Rick Doblin, like interviewed Mother Teresa, Deepak Chopra, the Dalai Lama. So I've like took his training course. It was very loosely kind of ran, kind of shorter than I would have anticipated, and like thousands of dollars cheaper than anybody else that was offering anything remotely close to that. And him having like this name in the psychedelic world that was like recognized, people knew who he was. He wrote the book MDMA is Medicine, and like was on Oprah and all this shit. And so I took his course, and you're actually the first person who I've like told, hey, this is who I trained under, because right after maybe about a year
Hmm.
after I finished his training course, um, somebody did like a headhunt on him and found out he did not write a master's thesis on MDMA. And well, he wrote it, didn't complete it, didn't turn it in, so it didn't count. He was at a Q&A that the Dalai Lama was speaking at and got to ask him one question, so he didn't really interview him. So like everything that he, like these
Yeah,
awesome accomplishments, right? He like indulged all of them and like lied about it and like made them sound way better than they
yeah.
actually were. So it kind of robbed him of all of his
Interesting.
credit, you know? So when people are like, "Who did
For
you
sure.
train under?" I'm like, "Oh, fuck. I'm going to say this guy's name," and it's bad. But through his training course, I learned like a groundwork, right? And then I got linked up with other facilitators from all over the world. Some of them being in the trade or in the industry for a very long time. So I kind of was able to seek mentorship through them. And then where I live in Northern California, I live in Nevada City, which is like somehow it's like a mecca for medicine work. Like you can throw a rock and like
Mm.
they do right across this valley from me. There's a teepee I can see from my house. They do ayahuasca ceremony there, and you name it, they do it kind of all over this area. So there's kind of a really big network of medicine workers where I was able to kind of find mentorship, work with other therapists who were doing this, and really kind of like get the training that I did not get inside of Jonathan Robinson's course. So he's who I finished the training with.
Yeah, man,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I only asked that question to highlight the fact that you have taken this seriously of learning how to do this and studying it and being in integrity, like we said. You're not somebody who, sat with medicine one time and you're like, yes, God called me to serve this to other people. I will save you. It's an interesting story with the Jonathan Robinson guy. It's like this academic stolen valor of like pretending to be more than you are. And it sounds like he didn't necessarily need to if he was like a pretty legit person and actually taught you good stuff. So it's almost like why stretch the truth of what you actually
Not at
are?
all. And I'm like, I
But
compare it to like the guy that like benched 300 pounds, right? But he goes home and he tells his friends he
yeah,
benched 325. And it's like, man, like
exactly.
300
Yeah, it's
pounds
like,
is,
dude, you've done
man, 300
enough.
pounds is awesome, but you lied about it and now it's all bullshit. So he did that,
Yeah.
and he had to face the piper. Someone called him out on like a big psychedelic platform and wrote a couple articles about him. It kind of sucked for everybody who did his training,
Man,
but
that stuff seems a lot more prevalent than you want to think. Like I was just watching something about how Lex Friedman calls himself like an MIT researcher, but he gave like one unaccredited guest lecture one time for like a free class just to get like the MIT email and calls himself like an MIT lecturer. That stuff is like super
It's
common.
crazy. I did a course through Harvard Medical on lifestyle wellness and coaching, and it'd be like me saying like I graduated from Harvard, right? From Harvard Med, when really
Yeah, yeah,
anybody can take the
exactly.
class. You just
Exactly.
pay for it.
It's funny. I still throw the term doctor in front of my name on occasion because it lends a little bit of credibility. But I always kind of joke like, "Hey, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm not that kind of therapist. Like, I'm a physical therapist." Someone on Instagram the other day was like, "Hey, what are your certifications?" And I was like, "What kind of answer are you even hoping for with this? Like, there is no certification that makes you like a good person or a bad person to work with in this kind of space." But
Integrity.
yeah, I just wanted to highlight that you're not a bullshit kind of person.
No, no, not at all. I took it very seriously. Before, like from when I started studying the medicine, before I actually sat with like my first client was probably like a 2 to 3 year span. So I've taken many courses online, lots of seminars, really um, studied childhood trauma quite a bit, and like the mind body connection and the pain body connection with childhood trauma and repressed trauma, and just like became a nerd on PTS and all the other symptoms that come from all the repressed trauma and compartmentalizing like a lifetime of it. So yeah, it was like
You just use that term pain body. Can you explain what that is? Someone was telling me about that the other day, and I'm not familiar with what that
so
means.
pain body. I could give you an example just of how it worked in my life when I first discovered that it was an actual thing that your body keeps the score. Everybody's heard of that book, The Body Keeps the Score. Um, for me, I was in a guided meditation with my therapist, who's now become a great friend and mentor of mine. And it's a type of meditation where it's not blissful. It's not like, ooh, find the woo woo. It's like, hey, what's in there and like what's going on. And as we're doing this meditation, he says, hey, do you have any pain in your body right now? Any significant pain? And I said, yeah, in my shoulder right here. I've always had this really hard, sharp pain in my shoulder. And he's like, well, what's it telling you? And I'm like, it's telling me it fucking hurts, dude. Like, what do you mean? He's like, no, there's something attached to it. Um, and it was like, bam, a light went off. And it was tied to this memory I had of being a child and being in a group home. And a kid had peed on me while I was asleep. I was probably like 6 years old, and this kid peed on me while I was sleeping. So the next day, I had like these cowboy boots that had like these chrome tips on them that were like these fancy looking leather cowboy boots with like these shiny metal tips. And I put them on and I kicked this kid in the face like a shitload of times while he was laying in his bed sleeping. And my whole life I felt terrible about it. It set a trajectory, from there on that I was labeled like this violent kid. And that came up. And during that meditation, he's like, okay, there's more there, there's more there. And I carried this guilt and shame about the incident because it was my first real taste of like extreme violence from being on like the delivering side of it. And I felt that I ruined that kid's life, that like I really fucked him up and potentially like ruined him forever. And in that meditation, there was this realization of like we were just two hurt kids doing the only thing that we knew how to do. And the pain went away like instantly. And it hasn't come back. And it was a pain that
Hmm.
had been there for a very, very long time. So I discovered that there was something there with the pain body and the mind body connection. And I really became fascinated with that. And in the medicine space, it often comes up because you're able to be a little bit more receptive and open minded to like, hey, maybe there is something why my lower back is killing me all the time. And every doctor says I'm fine, and I go to the chiropractor with no improvements. Um, so that's kind of like my relationship with that. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, and I'm still studying it. But that's kind of the how I discovered it.
That makes sense. Back in my physical therapy days, I was like, 24 years old, like just out of grad school. And we had this patient who was like this kind of older woman, was into a lot of like spiritual stuff. And she was coming to us for this hip pain. And she tried telling me one day that she felt like her hip pain was associated with like some emotional trauma from when she was younger. And like me and all the other clinicians kind of looked at each other and like rolled our eyes and it's like, okay, lady, like I have your x-rays right here. You have like severe hip arthritis. Like I think this is why your hip hurts, like fucking crazy
Yeah.
person. And now somebody tells me a story like that and I'm like, yeah, 100%. Of course your hip is probably because of these emotional traumas that you endured when you were younger. Like the arthritis probably doesn't really mean very much at all. So it's just kind of funny how that perspective has shifted from like me being 100% in the Western medical world to now me fucking hating that and leaving all of that behind. And you tell me this story, and I'm like, yeah, man, that makes a whole lot of
Yeah,
sense.
Gabor Mate wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, and in that book he talks
Yeah,
a
it's a good one.
lot. It's a lot more, I think, targeted towards women, but he starts talking about like cancer and uh, repressed trauma and asthma and repressed trauma and all these things. And you can kind of like Google like arthritis and repressed trauma, and you can find out like this the numbers of, sorry, there's a big ass bug calling him. And so there's a lot of correlation with repressed trauma and like dysregulated hormone systems in males and women, and like cancer and kidney failure and all this stuff. Like your body can only hang on to it for so long, and your mind does a really good job at protecting you from your subconscious, but your body's still dealing with it. So there is a huge connection to a lot of those things where people can't seem to find answers to their ailments, and it's often comes in the form of like therapy.
So you shared that story about the kid urinating on you and then you kicking him in the face as payback. And you said you wondered if you ruined that kid's life forever. Is that something that weighed on you like when you were that 6 year old kid? Or is that something you thought about later as an
Later
adult?
as an
Or like did you
adult,
kind of have that perspective? Yeah, okay.
I seen the kid when I was like 16 years old. I went to my cousin. She was in choir, so I would go to all her choir things. And there he was up on stage with his like face was like completely scarred, and and he just looked like this sad, timid kid. And I was like, man, I did that to him. Like I didn't even think about he peed on me and I gave him payback, like you said. I just was like overwhelmed from guilt, and from like 16 years old onward, I just always felt this way. And then it came up in that therapy session, and the pain went away, and I kind of like allowed myself forgiveness for it, knowing like, hey, we're just two kids that were hurt, and he was probably sexually abused and I was physically abused, and that was all there was to it. But after that, I looked him up. I like called my cousin. I was like, hey, remember this kid? I couldn't remember his name. I knew his name was Jesse, but I couldn't remember his last name. And she like went through her yearbook and found him, and I Googled him, and he's in prison for like sexually assaulting women on a college campus in California. So it's like
Yeah.
he was kind of like, I don't know. It was tough, but I was able to find forgiveness for myself. But for about like, shit, dude, a better part of 20 years, I carried a guilt of like, man, how could you do that to somebody?
We so when we first talked, I kind of gave you a rundown on some of the ins and outs of our program, and a lot of it's just really based around doing shadow work. And an analogy that we use to help people understand that process is thinking about it like rocks that you're carrying around in this backpack. And they're super heavy and they're weighing you down and they're digging into your back and it's super uncomfortable. And to me, the process of shadow work is like taking off that backpack, taking stock of what you're actually carrying around in there, which can be really scary or even almost shameful to admit some of that stuff to yourself of like, man, this has been in there in the back of my mind this whole time. But then after we look at it, we can leave some behind on the ground and kind of repack some in there and carry on, having let go of some of that stuff. What we always tell people is some of the heaviest rocks in that backpack are actually the ones that you put there yourself. Because they're also the things that happen to you. They're the things that, the ways that other people traumatize you, the shit that you went through. But that's what we've found is most of the time, the ones that weigh on you the most are the ones that you put inside that backpack on your own. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. It's like this kid never said anything to you necessarily that made you feel that way, but you saw him and you carried that guilt and that caused that pain that you felt. And then the healing, again, came from you forgiving yourself for it. It never really involved that other person at all. So to me, that's kind of an interesting, like, microcosm of how this stuff works, of like the weight that we carry, that we put on ourselves, and that then the healing is also up to us to forgive ourselves for it.
It's interesting. It's like,
does that analogy track with what you're
yeah,
experiencing?
it's like we are the sickness, but we're also the cure, right? We've like, it's almost like for a long time, having like a traumatic background, I always expect the worst thing to happen, right? So if my wife is like 5 minutes late, in my head, she's like wrapped around a tree down the road, and I'm not getting a wife coming home. And how many times you play these scenarios in your head and they never come true, it's like, and that took a lot of work to realize, like, hey man, you always expect the worst to happen. It's not, and it never fucking does, and for a long time it did, but
Well, that's right. That's like a very reasonable response in your brain to, hey, bad shit actually does keep happening, so I should just expect more bad shit to happen. That's a very rational response. That's like what we see with veterans who come back from overseas and they have this hypervigilance where they're constantly looking for an IED or looking for an ambush, and it's like, dude, you're in like Ohio, like it's not going to happen
yeah,
now, but their brain is still looking for it.
exactly.
So what did that, because you said it took a lot of work to undo that. Talk to us a little bit about what you have done personally, because I know you facilitate, you do all this stuff now, but what does your own healing look like? We'll kind of backpedal and talk about like why you needed to heal, but what was that process for you to undo all that shit?
So that's a loaded question.
I know it's a big question. I'm just going to shut up and let you talk for like an hour now.
I'll start with like what set it off, like where I was like, okay, dude, you are fucked up and you need to figure this shit out. Have really good life, a beautiful wife, own a business, own a plumbing business for like the last 10 years. Beautiful property in Northern California in the mountains on acreage, like life from the outside. And even from my perspective was like, couldn't be better, right? Find out my wife is pregnant. We never really planned on having kids. We kind of talked about it and we're open to it, but it was never really something where we're like, hey, let's have some kids. We started trying. She got pregnant really fast. At least it felt that way. She probably would say different. But and then I had my son. Life is amazing. I'm learning how to be a dad. There were some things where I was like struggling with, like if he was crying in the crib, like it just wouldn't register to me to like, hey, go nurture your son. Like he needs you. Like something was off there with like my ability to read the room and know when my son was in need of dad. So I was kind of working on that, like my response to the crying and the chaos that comes with having a newborn was triggering things in me that I really didn't understand and didn't really deal with prior to this. And then my son was 5 months old, and he was in my bedroom playing with some matches on the floor, like just a little book of matches. And as I bent down to take the matches from him, it was like, there's this movie screen again, and it went off. And I was like 3 years old, and my dad is holding me down in my bedroom, and he's burning me with matches on my fingertips. And I was like, whoa, what is that? And from that day forward, it was like this revolving door hamster wheel of like reliving all these childhood traumas, to where like every moment that I had that was special with my kid was like replaced with some fucked up memory from my childhood, to where I was, standing in my yard one day and I started planning my suicide or disappearing or whatever it looked like. I wasn't sure. But in my head, I thought my family would be better off without me. Um, my wife is beautiful. My son was like maybe 6 or 7 months old at this time, and he would be fine. He wouldn't remember me. I'm rationalizing all this shit. And then I went to a job site and was talking with this guy. And in the meantime, I had like hired a therapist. He ended up being like totally kooky, fired him, hired another one, fired her, and was like really just striking out with like finding help with people who understood actual trauma and how to undo it. Everybody I was meeting was like, they studied Jung for 4 years and they are going to fix me. And it wasn't working. And I met this guy on this job site and was just vulnerable with him. I had never really met him before, and told him like, "Hey man, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm gonna fucking kill myself this week," or whatever I said. He's like, "You should talk to my wife. Um, she does MDMA-assisted therapy." And I was like, "Okay." I'd always known about MDMA and ecstasy and never really did it. Really liked drugs. Through my teens and 20s, I liked to party and drink booze and snort cocaine, do all that shit. But I had always kind of stayed away from MDMA and other psychedelics. Not really sure why, but I did. And so I started doing my research on that. A friendship kind of developed with these two. So I asked her if she would refer me to a colleague, and she did. So I met this woman, and it wasn't like, "Oh, hey, I'm so and so. You're going to come to my office and do MDMA and everything's better." Like, I did a lot of intense therapy with her for months and months and months before it was time to sit with the medicine. And as the therapy kind of progressed and we tried EMDR, and that was terrifying. It was like reliving every uh, episode of trauma that I had, like over and over again, and I'm like, this is not going to work. This is horrible. Every time I leave your office, I'm in worse shape than I came. And the time came to sit with MDMA, and I did. And I had a woman facilitator and a male facilitator. So I was like tag teaming two therapists at the same time. Tuesday I'd go see this woman, Thursday I'd go see this dude. And this went on for quite a while. And then when I sat with the medicine, dude, it's like a 6 hour hug from God. It was like,
It's a nice way to describe it.
man, I cry thinking about it. Um, I didn't realize how much was in there, dude. Like so much. Like you can
Hmm.
like everything I thought that I had forgotten about was, dude, it was right at the surface, like at its boiling point. And I went through a whole lifetime of trauma in a matter of, I remember like taking my eye mask off and I was like, how long has it been? Dude holds up 4 fingers and I'm like, holy shit. It felt like 15 minutes, dude. And it'd been 4 hours. And I was just like, looking through this photo album from my childhood, and just so much love for everything and gratitude and all the stuff that had happened to me. And I found this forgiveness from my father in there that I didn't know even existed. I had always been like, yeah, I forgive him for whatever he did. But it didn't really mean shit until I actually processed what had happened, with a different lens, kind of like, it was very interesting uh, to be able to nurture that young part of myself in a way that had never happened. I had always had that love. I had a very abusive father, um, but I had this my mom's side of the family, that was just the stronghold in my life and a huge pillar. And that love always was kind of repulsive to me. Didn't know how to receive it. But once I was able to receive it from myself, kind of opened up this whole door of like, now I can receive it from others. Um, so I did that MDMA session, and like we talked about in the beginning of podcast, it was this aha God moment where like, holy shit, I want to give this to other people. And I remember saying out loud in that session, like, everybody needs to experience this. Everybody on earth needs to experience this at least once. Um, but I didn't go out the next day and call myself a shaman. I was like, all right, what's my next step? What do I need to study? How do I need, like, what courses can I take? And I really, for my own benefit, started studying trauma and repressed trauma. I started reading like Peter Levine books and Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kolk and like all these Carl Jung and like all this stuff that was like therapy and trauma and somatic work. And then I'm like, okay, cool. I got a good understanding of this. Now I want to start learning the other side of it and facilitating. So that one MDMA session.
Can I hit
Yeah, for sure.
pause? Sorry, I want to hit pause on like the
Yeah.
timeline and dig into a couple things that you said, but you can finish your thought. That one MDMA session, what were you gonna
That
say?
was like the catalyst for my healing journey. Like I wasn't fixed in a day. That didn't happen, but it allowed me to get out of my own way to where now I could see the trees through the forest and kind of like look around and like really observe my life from being more present and not living so disassociated and like in la la land. So I still go to therapy. I'm going to couples therapy today. Tomorrow, I'm actually sitting in a group circle with MDMA as a participant. So I still continuously do the work. And it's been 5 years since then.
I feel like that's the real value in like that first breakthrough experience for people is to show you what is possible, to show you what you are capable of feeling, especially the amount of love that you are capable of feeling and receiving and giving to others. And then the work becomes, well, how do I capture some piece of that on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis? And that's the integration work. And that's we'll talk about that as well. But going back to this story, when you had that sort of flashback moment when your kid was playing with the matches, you took it away and you had that memory. And it sounds like that kind of just opened the floodgates for more and more and more of those memories to come
Mm-hmm.
back, right? And that's something I've heard that's really common. Like someone with severe childhood trauma manages to forget all of it until they have a kid. And now it's like you remember every stage that you were at as you watch your kid growing up. How is that making you feel towards your son before you started this whole process? Like, did that affect your relationship with him? Did you almost become resentful because it was bringing all of this back up? Did it make you like, I, I don't know, how did that affect the dynamic there with your son?
In a weird, like selfish way, I was like jealous of him. Like
Mm,
for example, I remember one day my wife is like, look at how much he loves eating at the dinner table with his family. He's like 6, 7 months old. And instead of being like, wow, this is amazing, I was like, fuck, I never had that. My mom died when I was 5 months old. Like,
mm,
I don't have a single memory
yeah,
of eating at the dinner table with my family. Like that sort of thing, to where I was constantly letting like these amazing moments that I've created, like, this is the life that I've built, like I should be proud and thankful for this. But I was constantly like, I never had that. My life was fucked, blah, blah, just living in this like poor
yep,
me fucking
yep.
mentality. And my son was what was triggering it, and I used to say that,
Dude, I think
go ahead.
it's, nah, I was gonna say, I think it's probably really easy to fall into that, especially when you're not doing any of the healing. It's just like, man, how come he gets that and I didn't
Hmm.
get any of that? And you get resentful.
Yeah. And you're like, dude, he gets it because you're giving
It's
it to him. Like, wake up, dude. Hello,
yeah.
But,
And you should feel good about that,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So yeah, it was like this constant comparison, and I used to kind of say that MDMA saved my life. And then I like really reflected on that. And it was really like my son that saved my life. You know, without having him, like my subconscious would still be steering the ship. And
Oh yeah.
I'm so incredibly thankful
Why
for that.
was why was suicide the path forward out of that? Like why was that the kind of place that you settled on of like this is the solution to this problem?
Because like when I say it was a miserable time, dude, I would be like driving to a job site and pull over and just fucking bawl my eyes out in my car and like grip my steering wheel and rage and then like put a fucking smile on and like go talk to a homeowner and pretend like everything was okay. And this was like every single day. And the more I dove into repressed trauma and started reading books, the more it hurt because it was like, damn, I'm like reading books about myself. Especially The Body
Yeah.
Keeps the Score. I couldn't make it through a chapter of that book without being like, oh my God, this is me. Like, and it just seemed like a quick solution to fucking end it all, you know? And a couple weeks ago, I stood in that same exact spot where I had that conversation with myself in my backyard. And I looked at my kids are playing on the trampoline, jumping, and now there's two of them and not one. And life is amazing. And to think like, wow, dude, you almost gave all that up because of like you couldn't see the end of it, you know,
Yep.
and it was
Yep.
so close. The end, like the happy place was like right here, dude. And I was ready to just give it all up, man.
You were what, like 35-ish at that point?
Yeah, like 30, yeah, 34, 35. I'll be 40 in April.
And that was kind of the first time in your life that you actually like felt that pain, you know, when you're pulling over on the side of the road crying and raging and shit. Like that had never really come out before,
No,
at least not in that
never.
way, right?
No, never. I mean, I was always like quick to knock someone's teeth out growing up and be
For
violent in
sure.
that nature and surf big waves and ride motocross as fast as the fucking bikes will go and drive cars fast and drink gallons of booze and snort mountains of cocaine and do all this other reckless stuff that was, you know, obviously from all this trauma that happened in my life. It kind of like set my personality to be just kind of like a evil Knievel type lifestyle. But then once that kind of all went away, like when my kids were born, I kind of stopped messing around with all that shit. And then it was just me and my thoughts and my kids, and I didn't have a coping mechanism. And then it all came up.
That, yeah, that almost makes it worse. Cause like the way that I look at it, and I think this is kind of in line with how Gabor Mate describes this stuff. It's like you didn't have a drinking problem, you didn't have a cocaine problem. Like you had a substance solution to a pain problem. You had a substance solution to the problem of all the trauma and shit that you'd been through. So then you take that stuff away, which is objectively a good move once you have a kid. But now you take that stuff away and you're left with nothing to distract you or to numb you from it. And that's probably part of the reason why you were able to actually have those insights and have those memories start coming back
Mm-hmm.
because you weren't actively suppressing them with anything else. And you were actually like quiet enough to notice what was there. And that's the hardest fucking part. And that's why you felt suicidal because you're like, I don't know what to do with all of this pain. And it seems like it's not going anywhere. It seems almost like every day there's more of it as I learn more about this and I let more of it in. So, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Exactly. And, you know, as a kid, I got put into group homes at like 5 years old. And the first thing they did was put me on medication. So from a very young age, like numbing was the solution, right? So as I grew up,
Yep.
like through high
Yep.
school, smoked weed, you know, and then right after high school, actually even in high school, started fucking around with cocaine. And it just kind of evolved but I just always thought I liked to party, but I never really even realized I was numbing out everything.
Yep. Yep. You mentioned one thing, and then I want to circle back to this MDMA experience and the stuff with your father, but you mentioned trying out some different therapists and nobody seemed to really understand you and nothing was really fitting. And you said that you tried EMDR and that was really
I saw
terrifying.
you write that
Can you tell me
down.
about your experience with that?
Go ahead.
Because I've never done it myself, and I've heard mixed but mostly negative things from our clients who have gone through it. Because it almost seems like it dredges up a lot of these traumatic memories, but that's kind of the whole beauty of plant medicine is it you kind of re-experience these things but without the fear, without the shame, without the guilt, without the pain.
Mhm.
And instead you see it again, but you see and feel love. And it seems like that element is missing with the EMDR, where it just kind of brings these things back up, and then you're like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? So, what was your experience like with that?
Well, yeah, let me touch on this first because when you do this type of work with plant medicine, especially with MDMA, it shuts your amygdala down. So your fear
Correct.
receptors, they're there, but they're super numbed out. And you get the dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin boost in your brain. So processing this trauma under these medicines is less painful, right? When you do EMDR, you're fucking sober, like unless you are someone who's going to therapy on some dope or whatever, like you're in it, dude. Like you're there and you're forced to sit with it. So that's why I think people find it terrifying because you actually, like for me, for example, the way EMDR works, and I haven't studied much of it, but I do kind of get the baseline. It's kind of like that dude spinning machine where it's taking your focus off of your body and you're mainly into your mind and you're alternating with either like these buzzing paddles or tapping or you do eye movement, uh, you know, whatever. So for me, it was like, let's pick a traumatic event in your life and we're going to work on that. Well, okay, cool, let's do it. So we start the tapping and I think she's got like these buzzing paddles and they tap in each one of your hands and they alternate and you're in it. And sooner or later you kind of are zoned out on that. And then the woman, she's like, all right, let's work through this. Where are you? And like, boom, just like that. Like I'm 3 years old. I'm in my bedroom. I can feel the carpet in the room. I can see my uh, Hot Wheels like garage over there in the corner. I'm like, my room is just how it was as I was a kid. I got my crayon lamp over there, and I can like my sensories are all tuned into this. And then my dad busts through the door, and he fucking grabs me up, and I just like completely bailed. I'm like, fuck, what the fuck was that? And let's never do that again. It was like terrifying, dude. It was like I felt how I felt when I was 3 years old. And I'm like, I was in the system for 13 years. There's no fucking way I'm doing this for every traumatic event that I have to process. Like, absolutely not.
Right.
Um, I could see it being really powerful if, for like somebody who had maybe one domestic violence thing that stuck out, or one child abuse, or a rape, or a car accident, or something that they witnessed that was terrible. That was a one-time event. But for repressed trauma and like CPTSD, they want to call it, where it's complex and there's a whole lifetime of it. I just think it's the fucking, you're like kicking the can down the road, it's never going to end. Where do you draw a line and can you do some real work? And working with plant medicine seems to be, I don't want to call it like spiritual bypassing or anything like that, but it's almost like the fast track to healing like a lifetime of traumatic events. And EMDR
Hmm.
is like relive
That's
that.
an interesting distinction of like maybe EMDR is better suited for like one or two kind of traumatic events, but not a lifetime of it, an entire childhood of it, or an entire career of
Mm-hmm.
it. Like we work with a lot of first responders where it's like, hey, I've got 13 years worth of horrible shit that I've witnessed. And yeah, EMDR is not the answer for that either.
No, you'd have to do it every day.
And yeah, Well, yeah. So, what is it going to take me 13 years of EMDR now to undo all that? Like that's not a good solution either. And I don't love it. You know, you said spiritual bypassing. Like, I don't think that that's what this is. And I know that's not what you meant. And, you know, you hear people say, like, oh, one ceremony of ayahuasca is like 10 years of therapy. I kind of hate that analogy too, because it's like, yes, it accelerates this, but it's different. Like, it's not just like sitting there talking about it for 10 years. You're experiencing it in a completely different way. And you said that the MDMA, and maybe it was that first experience, or maybe you're saying more generally, but it helped you to find forgiveness for your father. How does that work? Because we haven't touched on here about everything that he did and put you through. You can explain to whatever degree you want to, but like, how does MDMA lead to you forgiving this person who kind of was the foundation of so much suffering that you went through?
Um, Empathy is the probably the biggest
Mm-hmm.
word, and I was like in the experience. I knew my dad was adopted, um, and I knew his life. Like he was adopted at about 3, and I knew his life wasn't
Mm-hmm.
good prior to that, but I didn't necessarily know how bad it was. Um, and our personalities are forming from utero till about 3 years old. Like what you were going through as a child and in your mother's womb is, forming uh, you in a sense as a human being and how you are going to be um, through the rest of your life. And those first 3 years of his life were not great. He was a child of adultery, um, and his mom didn't want him. He was like, I think he was a middle child even, and they adopted him at 3 years old. But until then, he'd have a shitty diaper, and he would just be left in a crib to scream and cry. And nobody took care of him. Nobody loved him, And they've done studies in the past, which are pretty fucking sickening, that if you leave a child unattended, they can have food, water, nutrients, everything they would need, but you don't give them touch and interaction, they die, you know? And he didn't have any of that. And I was able to look at it from a lens of like, wow, a lot of it is his fault, but it's only because he didn't do the work, you know? Um, but I had this empathy for him of like, wow, he had it fucked up as a kid and it just never was undone. And kind of triggers back to where you asked what was the turning point where I wanted to take my life. Because I called my dad and I asked him about his parents. I said, what kind of parents did you have? And it was actually when my wife was pregnant. I haven't even had a baby yet. And he said he had great parents. He's like, I had great parents. They were amazing. My dad worked a lot. Mom was around. She took care of me. My dad wasn't around all the time, but I had amazing parents. And then when I started losing my mind, I was like, fuck, dude, this is hereditary. Like, I'm a psychopath like my dad. And this is because he had good parents. At least I thought. Like, I thought I was just fucked like he was. And then I started understanding, like, trauma a little bit more because before I'm going into this MDMA setting, I'm studying repressed trauma, childhood, utero, all of this stuff that leads up to who we are today. So I kind of had a little bit of a better understanding of like, wow, he's fucked up because of the things that happened to him before he was adopted. So I kind of felt for him. Um, he was a pretty bad dude. My mother died. Do you want to get into this, or do you have any more questions?
Go into it, man.
Um, so my grandfather was retired Marine, fought in World War II, tail end of World War II, and all through Korea, and was medically discharged as a staff sergeant. He got tuberculosis, or he probably would have done his entire life in the Marine Corps. My mother, they had 9 kids, 4 boys and 5 girls, and my mother kind of landed in the middle of that. She grew an attraction for Marines. She wanted to marry a Marine. So she would go sneak onto base with her girlfriends, pretend they worked for the press, and they would be like news reporters or whatever, and they would go to the clubs on base. And she loved to dance and loved Bruce Springsteen. And she met my dad on El Toro Marine Base in like 1985, 84, 85. And shotgun wedding, ended up pregnant, got married. I was at the wedding in my mom's belly. And I was born. My dad was from Massachusetts and wanted to move me back there. He was an only child from his adoption, already an alcoholic, was already abusive at this point. I know this now from like uncovering letters. And they had a fight about moving back east, and my dad beat my mom up, and she took me, went to her parents' house, and collapsed on the front porch with me in her arms at 5 months old. And she went in the hospital, and she didn't come out. She died from blunt force trauma. And her dying words to my family were, "Don't hate Paul. Don't hurt Paul." That's my dad's name. So, ironically, I'm a junior. I have the same name as the dude who killed my mother. And that's been a tough one. That's a hard one to have to live with. And getting a name change is a fucking nightmare. But anyways, she said that there was some fishy stuff that went on in the hospital where they misdiagnosed her with viral encephalitis. There was an outbreak or a few cases on the East Coast of Tripoli during that time frame. My mother was back there visiting, and the symptoms were similar, with this brain swelling and seizures and all that. So they treated her as if she had encephalitis, and the combination of the misdiagnosis and the abuse ultimately led to her death. And I was 5 months old at that time. She died September 18th, 1986. And so her dying words, my dad did no jail time for that. He got off the hook. And from that point on, he was an absent father, really. I don't have a whole lot of memory from those very young years, 5 months till about 3 or 4. I think my memories kind of start to kick in around 4 years old, where things really stand out. He'd drop me off at my grandparents' house. They lived down the road, and he'd be like, "Oh, I got to go to a job interview," and then he'd pick me up a week later. Really just kind of started abandoning me very young. And then at about 4 years old, one of my very first like distinct memories that I have is him like carrying this girl up a flight of stairs in the apartment that we lived in. And like he has her over his shoulder, carries her upstairs, and he just beats the fuck out of her, like right in front of me. And he's telling me like, she's in trouble, she's bad, this is what happens when you're bad. And he just beats the brakes off of this woman. And then she pins me underneath the bar. There's like a bar that separated the kitchen from the living room, and like a little passway. And she's telling me what a piece of shit my mother was, and all of this terrible things about like, and she was just hurt, and that was her way of like releasing that hurt, and I don't blame her for that even to this day. But for a long time I did. I was like, man, that was really good for her to say that, but that's kind of how my childhood started. And then at 5 years old, I made allegations that my father molested me. I still don't know whether or not it happened. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that could have been coincidental, how I said it happened added up to things that were missing in the house, and I was in the hospital with a torn rectum. Had to have, like, I don't know if I had surgery, but I remember going to Children's Hospital of Orange County and happened to get put under. And then I remember waking up from the surgery and going out on the street, and they had a wrecking ball on a crane, bam, and they were like demoing this building across the way. So I remember that period. I don't remember details of like what happened. Um, but long story short, my grandparents, they had had enough. They contacted a friend who was an attorney, and they said you need to get the state involved. And so they called CPS. And then one day we're having a family party at the house. My grandparents had like really bitchin' house in Orange County, California. Swimming pool and all the families. Like we just had cousins. They had 9 kids, and they Catholics, dude. They were breeders, man. Everybody had like 5 kids of their own, and there was like 20 of us grandkids running around all the time. And my grandparents had the hub, dude. It was so cool to be there with the family. We're having a pool party one day, and the cops show up, and they want to talk to me. And the next thing I know, I'm getting hauled off in the back of a police car, on my way to my first group home. And my life kind of took a crazy turn from there onward.
How old were you when you found out that your father was responsible for your mother's death?
Oh, on my 16th birthday. I had always kind of had inclinations. I knew he was abusive, like, um, but I didn't know to what extent. And on my 16th birthday, my Uncle Don was like, hey, time you know the truth. And he hit me with the truth, and it didn't even surprise me one bit, because at this point I had gone back to live with my father, dealt with the abuse firsthand, remembered everything. Like I knew he was this fucking evil, sick person. But yeah, it was my 16th birthday. I found out. Um,
And you told me you were in and out of like foster homes and group homes and stuff like that until you were what, like 14, and then you were looking at doing some jail time, and you ended up going back with your uncles in
yeah,
California.
so
Is that correct?
the first group home I was in was called Orangewood Children's Home. It's like a big facility, kind of like a hub where they'll like get you there, get you medicated, figure out placement for you, and then they'll send you off to another group home. Um, that was where I kicked the kid in the face. Uh, and from kicking that kid in the face, it landed me in a mental hospital, County USC mental hospital. I actually went there a couple of weeks ago and stood out front of that place, and was just like, holy shit, it's like all closed and dark and abandoned. And it's just a scary looking building. But so I landed there. That place was fucking horrible, dude. I mean, if you refuse the medication, they just strap you down, shoot Thorazine in your ass, and strap you to a bed. Like the trauma and the things I went through in the system was far worse than anything I could have ever gone through at home with my family. Um, it didn't ever make any sense to me why I was taken away from my grandparents and they didn't get custody. They were amazing people, raised 9 kids. My grandfather owned,
I was wondering
yeah, he
too.
owned several barbershops and beauty salons. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom, amazing woman, and then she had all these kids that every one of them would have adopted me in a heartbeat, you know. Um, but there was a custody battle. My dad wouldn't. He still maintained some sort of say so over what happened to me in my life and would not give custody to the new family. So I stayed in group homes until I was about, I want to say like 6th or 7th grade. They finally were like, okay, we're going to let you out, but we're going to release custody back to your father. So my dad at this time, when I was like 6 years old, he split and moved to Boston, and I didn't see him for fucking years at a time. And one time he showed up and he had a new wife, a girlfriend. She was pregnant, and I really felt like, man, I just don't matter at all. Like he started a new family. Um, And that was this huge sense of like abandonment that I had felt for the first time, even though I had already been in group homes for like 6 years by then. So anyways, he got custody of me shortly after that. I had a little brother that lived in Maine. His name's Shane. He's actually deceased. He died 2 years ago of a fentanyl overdose. That's his helmet, actually. But anyways, they released custody to my father. The night I get out of group homes, he had rented an apartment in Anaheim, and he got drunk on mudslides. He's like, "Oh, we'll celebrate. This is a huge day. We're gonna celebrate." Yada yada yada. So he got all the fixings for mudslides, showed me how to make them, poured me one. I got drunk for the first time, and I don't know if I got out of hand or what the fuck happened, but he flipped, and he gets like this look in his eyes, like pupils. It's almost like a possession, dude. Like his pupils get as big as his fucking eyeballs. He gets foam in his mouth. Like I could close my eyes and see it right now. And that guy comes out, and it's like somebody else has taken over his body. It's fucking insane. And he just grabs me up and slams me to the floor and just beats the shit out of me and is like, "I'll fucking take you back. Like, I will take you back to the group." And I remember being a kid, very young, and if like I cried in the car or whatever, like he'd pull into a driveway and he'd be like, "This is a home for bad kids. This is where I'm gonna leave you." And he fucking eventually did that, And so here I am, excited to get out of group home with my first night out, and my dad's beating the fuck out of me, drunk on mudslides. So that's kind of how that kicked off, my free life, wasn't so great. And then shortly after that, I started public school for the first time. I was like, I think, like I said, sixth or seventh grade. I got kicked out of school like first week. Ended up in a continuation school. And then shortly after that, we moved to Boston. And all my support group, everybody I had out here in California is now 3,000 miles away. And I'm kind of on my own out there, living with my dad and my grandmother. And it was really fucked, man. Like I got into sports. I started playing baseball. I got bullied a lot. I was like this surfer kid from Southern California. The chicks were like, "Oh, who's this cutie in town?" And all the dudes are like, "Fucking get him," like just constantly fighting, constantly getting picked on, bullied so bad. And I kind of fit in, started finding my place there. The abuse continued. My dad was like super into alcohol, nothing really else, just alcohol. And he'd drop me off at my baseball games and be like, "Oh, I'm going to go play my number at the VFW." And, ninth inning comes around, all the kids' parents are there, and my dad's fucking gone. And I'd have to like walk up to the post and find him, drunk and forgot all about me like he always did. I started getting into trouble out there and ended up in group homes just the same. Getting the group homes, getting fights, then ended up in juvenile detention center. The first time I got locked up there, my dad, it was actually the last time my dad had ever hit me, but he was pounding my head off like the tile wall in the bathroom, like just like had me by my ears. He beat me with a fucking drumstick and then grabbed me by my ears and was just like fucking slamming my head off the tile wall in the bathroom. And I'm like 13 years old. And the violence, like, I don't ever remember it being painful. But it was just weird. It was like my normal, right? But anyways, I was able to kind of like shove him off of me, and he tripped backwards over the bathtub and kind of hit his head and like stunned himself. And man, I just fucking unloaded on him. Like, I just beat him until he stopped moving. And my grandmother had called the police, and when the police came to the house, they took me to jail. And I was like a Friday night. I had court on Monday morning. I went to court, like full handcuffs, shackles, like handcuffed to my waist, shackled around my feet. Like your fucking waist is chained to your feet. Like you ain't going anywhere. You ain't running. And I'm 13 and I'm in jail because my dad abused me, and I stood up for myself. I was charged with domestic violence. I had a $1 bail, and the only person who could bail me out was my dad. And I sat in jail. I had a 30-day sentence, and I sat in jail for 30 days. No visitors, no phone calls from my dad. My grandparents would call me every day. And that kind of set the trajectory there for me being, I mean, I'd get out of jail and I'd be back in a day. And eventually I had gotten into a fight. This kid pulled a knife on me. I beat him up and I took his knife and I buried it in the cemetery by my house. And he ended up being a son of a Boston cop. And I got a strong arm robbery charge. And then I had stolen some shit from a doctor's office. I went for a checkup at a doctor's office and I stole 18 disposable thermometers, a reflex hammer, and an inhaler. So random, dude. But the reflex hammer had like, you know what they are, right? Obviously, but do you know how the tip is sharp on the metal tip? It comes to a point.
It's almost like a spike.
And
yeah.
To me, it was a fucking weapon. And that's why I took it. And the thermometers, I don't have a clue about. And the inhaler was albuterol, which I thought would make me feel fucking good for a little bit. I don't know. But I got like a big charge for it because it was stealing from a medical facility. And I was looking at, doing the next 4 years in a maximum security lockdown facility
for that.
And being
Jesus Christ, man.
So I was in this place in Fall River. It was 23-hour day lockdown. I didn't go outside for 8 months, dude. They had a gym in the basement. You could go work out. And I went from that facility in handcuffs and shackles. They took me to get a haircut on the way and then walked me to the terminal at Logan Airport and uncuffed me before I got on the plane. And the probation officer was like, Paul, I'm really sorry that the last few years of your life have been this way. He said, but it was the only way that we could keep you away from you. And I'm like, fuck, dude, I got this whole family out here that wants me. And the only way you could keep me away from him is by fucking locking me up with a bunch of animals, dude. Like, being a skinny little white kid in a Boston jail was fucking scary, dude. Like, it was predominantly black. I'm not built like that. I'm 5'10" now and I'm 160 pounds. Imagine what I looked like at 14, It was terrifying, the worst abuse I got in there came from the fucking guards, man. Like, I remember walking into a conversation where some kids were talking about one of the guards being hot and how they would fuck her or whatever they were talking about. And I walked like into this conversation in the rec yard and kind of participated for a second, just trying to fit in. And then I got rolled up by guards later that night. You're talking like this about so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. So their punishment for me was to sit in a fucking plastic chair for 7 days in a hallway. Like down the hallway, like everybody's cells are down this long corridor. And my chair was parked in the fucking hallway. And I could get up to use the bathroom and I could take a shower. But I ate my meals in that fucking chair. And I did everything in that chair for 7 days. As a kid, like that is torture. It wasn't teaching me anything. It was just torturous. And that's like lightweight of what went on in these facilities. They'd put problematic kids together in cells, and I'm sure as shit they were betting on them for like who would win a fight. And it would constantly happen to me. They'd throw a kid in my cell they knew I had a problem with, and 5 minutes later they're fucking dragging his limp body out of this place over and over again. And I just became extremely violent and full of hate and rage, like at a young age. And then they took me to the airport terminal and let me go. And I got on a plane and flew into LAX. And uh, my life was forever changed because I had a support group, and these people who had been fighting for me my whole life now had custody of me. But I was far from a normal kid, and everybody in my life thought that I was supposed to be normal now that this part of my life, this
Yeah,
chapter.
you're
Yeah,
back.
I'm
You're back
back.
with the
Yeah.
family. You're free now.
Mm-hmm.
Just be a normal kid.
And it was not the
Bro,
case.
I'm sure that was so disconcerting for all the other people on that flight.
Yeah, right.
Like this fucking convict looking kid just gets marched up in chains and then just let go and it's like gets on the plane with them. Like what the
I
fuck?
couldn't believe it, dude.
Dude, so how long did you spend in that? So it was like a juvenile detention center essentially, right? Like that's what that would be considered, that place that you were at?
Yeah, dude. Juvenile detention center. I'll show you a picture of it just because it's worth seeing. Because when you say like, oh, a kid juvie, um, when you say a kid juvie, you don't think of this, right? You're not thinking of this like fucking insane asylum looking place, Like that's where I was at. Like this over here on this side, I was on the second floor right
Mm.
there. And it
What's the name of the
that's
place?
Taunton State Hospital. It was a loony bin
Okay.
for a long time, which is such a not the word I should use. It was a mental institution for a very long time. Lizzie Borden was housed there. She's the chick who killed her parents with the axe. Um,
Oh shit.
it,
What was the total amount of time that you spent inside there, would you say?
so for those like 3 years, I was on the East Coast. 3 or 4 years, I spent more time incarcerated than I did on the street. But the
Okay.
longest stretch was like 8 months. I spent two
Okay.
Thanksgivings, one Christmas, multiple Halloweens, like just kind of always in it. And they tried to place me in group homes, but like I would run. I was a flight risk. I was on the run for a long time. They put me in a minimum security place. I escaped from there and got out, went on the run. So maximum security was the only place that could kind of like keep me in check.
And then how old were you when you got dropped on that airplane to go back to
It was a
California with
summer
that side of your
before.
family?
Age is really tough. I think when you're young, you gauge age based on a grade you were in, and I didn't
Totally.
go to school so it was the summer before my freshman year of high school. So I think I was like
Okay.
15, 14 or 15. And then I was
Yeah,
like,
okay,
all
that makes
right, cool.
sense.
Now you're in public school. And I had never been to school in my fucking life for more than like a couple weeks.
Man, so all right, I'm slightly torn as the interviewer here of like what direction to go in because this could just become like a 6 hour saga of you sharing like all of the fucking crazy stories and terrible things that you went through.
Yeah.
Because I know that everything that you shared so far has kind of been a preamble to the real craziness that started to occur with some of the other stuff that you shared with me
Yeah.
of like growing and selling drugs and selling weapons and getting involved with some other nefarious individuals. But I almost want to save some of that maybe for later and get back to like the medicine part and the healing
Yeah.
part. Because it's like the war stories, quote unquote, like that's fun to hear about, but I feel like that's not really what people need to hear about
Yeah,
in
for
order to actually
sure.
help anybody here. So the thing that I want to hear you talk a little bit more about is you set the stage for us to understand at least some small glimpse into the fucked up reality that was your childhood. And you shared earlier how the MDMA started to help you get in touch. I think the terms you actually used was to nurture your inner child self that never got any of that nurturing. So what the fuck does that mean? How does one nurture their inner child when you say that like what did that entail? What did that look like? How did that happen? And what happened when you started to do that? I know I just asked you like seven very broad questions, so take that whatever direction you will, but
Um,
how does the inner child healing work?
so I was nurtured as a child. I had a loving family. It didn't come from my mother. She obviously only had was able to do that for a very short period. Um, my grandparents are amazing. All my aunts and uncles, mostly amazing. Now they're all amazing humans. But my ability to receive that nurture was non-existent, almost to where it was like repulsive. Like if I had an aunt come up and like love on me or like cuddle me, bless you, cuddle me like a mother would, it was, dude, it was like, get the fuck away from me. I would never say that, but inside I'm like cringing and like wanting to run away from it. But the MDMA, I just looked at a picture of myself at a very young age and I had this scar across my face. Um, and, man, I just remember kind of like telling myself that it's okay. Like it's okay to feel all the feelings that you have. Like I gave myself permission to be sad and be angry and not feel guilty about the feelings I had for my past, from my father, and to really just kind of like go and give that little kid a hug, you know. And it was like I listened to your interview you did with Mike LeGregney yesterday, and dude, I was just in tears, like working in my garage, like man, it's like very similar to my healing story of like little Paul came out to play, and for the first time in a very long time, and he was very much present there, and I was able to just love on him in a way that he hadn't been able to receive.
You have a sense of why you found that love like repulsive as a kid? Did you understand what that was at all, or you just didn't want it?
I remember always wanting to call somebody mom.
Hmm.
Hey, you got me crying a lot in this. You're good. You're good at this.
Sorry,
No,
bro.
it's all good. I remember always wanting to call somebody mom. And the first person I did that wasn't my mother, like broke broke that forever. Like she just wasn't a good person.
Hmm.
And she probably wasn't a good person because of how my father had treated her. You know, he broke her jaw when she was 7 months pregnant. She got her fucking wires taken out of her jaw the day before she gave birth. So knowing this now, I like you have empathy for this woman, and but I don't know why it was repulsive, but it was like you're not my mother type feeling. Like don't try to love on me like
Yeah.
you're. Um,
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. One of the I shared our backpack analogy that we use with our clients. One of the other things that we talk about is that no, it's like no relationship with someone else will ever be more healthy than your relationship to yourself. And that's kind of what I hear in there too. It's like you can never receive more love from somebody else than you're capable of extending to yourself either. And what I'm hearing is, you grew up, whether it was explicitly told to you with words or not, like you grew up feeling worthless, probably, and not deserving of being cared for.
just unseen, I think.
And so,
No, I don't think
yeah.
I ever felt worthless.
Mm.
I don't know, man. It's tough. It's really hard. I like uncover more and more stuff as I grow up. I have like boxes and files of stuff. And just a
For
couple
sure.
weeks ago, I uncovered something that was really amazing to me, that my grandmother would write all her prayers down. Like she would, like as
Mm.
people pray, she would write them down, like in a journal, and very
Mm.
specific. And one of the things that she was praying for, and the date, I was 5 years old, and she's praying that I would be happy, that I could just not be so angry and not be so sad, and that I could find joy and trust in people. And it made me really reflect on like how bad was I? Like how fucked was my life to where a 5-year-old would be sad and unhappy and angry? Like I look at my 5-year-old and he's just like, yeah, he has angry moments, but he's happy. He's full of joy and he's not sad. And yeah, just so I don't really know what emotion or what like personality I could tie to myself as a young kid, but I think from other people's perspective that I was just sad and angry. But I remember being somewhat happy, and always fucking off, like always causing trouble. Like young age, like dude, I was lighting shit on fire and breaking things and stealing and sneaking around, like as long as I could remember. And I just think it just, part of that beginning phase of life just kind of shaped me into a very reckless kid. And I don't think I ever felt unworthy. I think unseen was, you know, probably the way that I felt. Um, Definitely unwanted, like even after high school or like through high school, when shit got real, like tough with living with my grandparents, I moved to my aunt and uncle's house in Northern California. And then when shit got real there, they were tired of my shit. They bounced me to somewhere else. And it was like this reoccurring pattern. I don't fault these people for that. Looking back now, I kind of feel a little differently. Like, hey man, when shit got real is when I needed people the most. And whenever I needed people the most, they kind of pushed me off to the next person. I couldn't tell you how many times I was restrained in group homes, and all I needed was a hug. I didn't need to be fucking held down to a floor and filled with more anger and rage. I just needed somebody to fucking hug me and love on me. Um, so I think kind of that unseen, jeez, fucking getting a wedgie. Unseen and unwanted is probably, if I had to put two titles to it, that'd be it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I'm sure you can kind of take this perspective now that your uncles and aunts and grandparents, they were also just doing the best that they knew how to do, because it's not like they were well equipped to figure out how to take care of you. But I can understand that feeling very
I
much of
think
like, hey,
that's
this is when I actually needed support and I got pushed off.
yeah, and I think that's a huge cop out, dude. Well, I only did the best I could with the tools I
Yeah.
had. Well, fucking buy more tools, dickhead. Like, come on, like, you know what I mean? You got a
Well,
job
so
to
yeah,
do. You invited me into your home as a child, and this is not directed towards my family if they see this, but I see it a lot. I know a guy that adopted kids, and it got hard, and he fucking sent them to like boarding school. And I'm like, what a piece of shit, dude. Like, you don't adopt children from another country and then send them to fucking boarding school when parenting gets hard.
So how do you balance that with like the forgiveness that you found for your dad?
Oh, man, so
You know what I'm
much
saying? Like,
gratitude.
because
So much gratitude. I would have kicked me
hmm,
out too. You know what I mean? I would have kicked me out too. I was not an easy kid to deal with. I remember one day, right, like getting in trouble and like leaving on my dirt bike, fucking Mach 10. And as I left the driveway at my aunt and uncle's house, I like roosted the trash cans over and fucking knocked trash all over the street. And then like rip a wheelie down the road and was off. And it was their wedding anniversary. And they've forgiven me this so many damn times. And I still like hang on to like, man, that's fucked up. How are you going to spend your anniversary doing that when you're trying to help this kid? They had two boys of their own. Right?
hmm.
It's not their responsibility to raise me. And I shit all over them. Just so much gratitude for my family. Like so much. Like even though I have these feelings of like oh, they gave up on me. They never did. They might have like gave up on me in those moments. But at a certain point, you have to protect your marriage. You have to protect your own children. And when the person you're helping is becoming a fucking wedge in your relationships with your wife and your own kids, they gotta go. You know, whether they're your nephew or a kid down the road.
You know, instead of like, oh, they did the best they could with the tools they had, and you're like, well, that's a fucking cop out. Like, that's bullshit. Do you help me understand that? Because it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like there can be forgiveness for people because you have the compassion, understanding, gratitude that like they helped you as much as they did, but then also, I don't know. I'm trying to balance this because I don't know the fucking
I
answer. This is
contradicted
something else that we
myself
talk
big
about. It's like
time.
forgiveness. Well, yes, that's what I'm trying to understand, like how you actually feel about it. Because something we talk about is like forgiveness versus accountability. Like this dude Toby in our program got blown up by a fucking IED, right? So he's talked about how he can like find forgiveness for the person who emplaced that IED, and yet he would still feel justified in like taking that dude's life if he saw him doing it over there.
100%. And
So it's like we can find forgiveness on the spiritual plane, but then also accountability on this like physical one.
exactly. So that's where it is. It's like it is the forgiveness, knowing like they did the best they could with the tools they had, right? That's true. You can always learn more tools. But at a certain
Right.
point, but
We
also at a
could have done
certain
better.
point, how many times are you gonna let this kid disrupt your marriage, disrupt your relationships with your kids? Like I was sneaking out all night, doing fucking cocaine, coming home high on mushrooms, taking shit apart, like covering myself in chocolate pudding and fucking running around the house. Like I was this like I was like this kid.
Not easy to live
Not
with.
easy to live with, man. We had my brother and I came home. He's my cousin, but my brother and I came home one night and we had eaten some mushrooms. And he's like, I'm gonna go take a shower. Like, just hang tight here in my room. We'll hang out. We'll watch Beavis and Butthead after. And they had like this big bowl of like chocolate pudding in the fridge. And you can cut this out if you want, but it's hilarious. Um, and I like grabbed the whole bowl and a spoon, and I got a little bit on my hand, and it like felt good. I was like, oh, that feels good. And then like I started like rubbing it and like rubbing it, and then like the shirt came off, and I'm just like, fuck, this is amazing. Like he comes back from a shower, and I'm just sitting Indian style, and I'm covered with fucking chocolate pudding from like the waist up, dude. And he's like, bro, what are you doing, man? Like, anyways, that was the kind of fun we were having. Hope it's kids don't watch.
Oh my gosh, dude. I love that your brother is your interesting family dynamics. Like, it's always fun. It's like, yeah, that's my cousin, uncle. It's my
Yeah,
brother, cousin over there.
it's interesting.
Um,
So yeah, so my aunt and uncle adopted me like in high school. They're amazing. They're my kids' grandparents. They're grandma and grandpa to them. They live 5 minutes down the road. They've always been a huge pillar in my life, and they have two boys, Ned and Nick. And Nick and I were, he's born in December, I was born in April, so he's a few months older than I am. And we've just been inseparable since we were kids. Like every we did everything together. You know, like when we were together, it was like couldn't break us apart. And he's like my fucking best friend in the whole world. Ironically, I have another brother named Nick. He's actually my brother. So I have two Nicks, and then brother Zachary, who is my dad's kid, and then Ned. It's actually a cousin. It gets confusing.
we need a flow chart. Um, the one other really important thing I want to hear your thoughts on is, I mean, you got a million fucking stories I would like to hear, but I had, things I actually wanted to pull
Mm-hmm.
out here. Um, what do you make of that interaction that you had when you told that dude at that job site that you were suicidal? And he was just happened to be like, "Oh, you should talk to so and so," and like that set you down this whole like in your worldview. What do you chalk that to? Is
God,
that random?
there's,
Is that like
there's no such thing as random.
tell me about?
It's providence, dude. That's what that is. That
I mean, I agree, but enlighten the listener. Why do you feel that way?
because I have no reason not to feel that way until I have like some. When I heard Mike say yesterday in his podcast that when you're dead, it's just lights out, I'm like, you don't really believe that.
Dude, I laughed so hard
Yeah.
at
I'm
him that like he's worried about death.
like, you don't actually believe that. Like, just look at us, dude. You know what I mean? This is
Mhm.
amazing to be in a human body. This isn't something that happened by accident, right? There's a divine, at least for me, there's a divine something out there, you know? And I believe it. Just the other day, just yesterday, Jared called me up and he's like, "Hey, I have a client I'd really like to pass you on. She lives in Petaluma. She lives close, it's like an hour drive from me, 2 hour drive. And it's a woman. I'm always, whenever I have a woman client or a potential client who's a female, I get uneasy because in the MDMA setting, it's very intimate. It's one on one. It's a touchy. It's a touchy space. Um, so I always have this overwhelming sense of like I do not belong working with them. It's weird, and it's not even justified. Some of the most amazing breakthroughs I've ever done in the medicine space have been with women. And he texts me that we have a conversation about her, and like 5 minutes later, my phone goes off, and I'll read this to you because it's special. And it's a woman who I worked with like 2 years ago, and she messaged me randomly. I haven't spoke to her since December of last year, and she said at 1:25 yesterday, she said, "Hi, Paul. I want to share that every time I release another layer of sexual trauma, I remember the kind and generous support you provided me. Thank you for being there for me. I am so grateful." So as I'm having this moment of like doubt, I get a random ass text message from a female client telling me, "Thank you so much."
That's awesome.
It's the same as the guy on the hill, you know, and I can't chalk it up to anything other than divine intervention.
So how come then? Because I agree with you fully. I believe in coincidences anymore. How come this happened for you? Because I'm sure it's easy for you to think, your life has a very different trajectory than it used to. And you told me, you called up your dad and he was like, yeah, I had good parents, but he had all these things happen to him before he was adopted. And you thought that you were basically cursed to end up the same way.
Yeah.
Or you can look at that guy, Jesse, who you guys were in the same home at one point. He ended up in prison. You ended up here having this great life. Your brother Shane, you haven't shared much about him, but similar kind of scenarios, and then ended up overdosing. How come they are where they are and you are where you are?
God. uh, um, and not so much my relationship with him, her, it, or whatever you want to call it. My grandparents were devout Catholics. Like never missed a mass. The whole time I was in the group homes, I was still on the weekends. Like my 2 day fucking weekends, one of them was spent in catechism, like studying for my first communion, and the other one was spent in mass. And then I was back to the group home. So I had like a slingshot in one hand and a Bible in the other growing up. And I think their relationship with God kept them grounded enough to navigate the storm. Like and never give up. When I say people like pass the buck on me, like my grandparents, they never, ever, ever, they never gave up on me. One time I called my grandfather and I was in jail. I was like 23. I was 21. It was my 21st birthday. And I asked him to bail me out. And he said no. And that was probably the hardest no he ever had to deliver. But it was the most impactful one in my life. And I don't see that as him giving up on me. I see that as him showing up even more. Because it would have been easy for me to get bailed out, but I wouldn't have the shit scared out of me in a fucking LA County jail for 2 weeks, and never go back to that place. But their relationship in God and my family's relationship in God, I think kept them grounded and gave them this pillar to stand on to where they could navigate the next, 23, 27 years of my life before I finally figured my shit out.
Are they still around?
No, unfortunately not. My grandfather passed away 2010, I think. I'm not sure the days. He died on Father's Day. And then my grandmother passed away, I think, around 10 years now.
That had to be hard.
Yeah, it was tough, man. I always wondered growing up, like, what sucks more, losing a mom and never remembering her, or knowing one your whole life and losing her. And my grandmother was very much the mother of my life. And it fucking sucked. It was really hard. I got to spend a lot of time with her in her final years. She had a stroke about 7 years before she passed away, so she required 24-hour, not care, but she couldn't live life on her own. So she'd come spend a couple weeks with me. We made a bedroom in our house for her, and then she'd go, rather than put her in a nursing home, all the kids, most of the kids, kind of took turns taking care of her. But my Aunt Crystal did the majority of that. So I had a lot of time to spend with her before she passed. And when she passed, all the boys were together out in the desert camping. So it was kind of a special moment. But yeah, it was hard. They both sucked,
Yeah.
But they were amazing people. Forever grateful.
Well, unlike what Mike thinks, I definitely believe that they're still there with you in some capacity, in some form.
Every day.
So you shared how this instance with your son, kind of open the floodgates for all of this, started down this healing path, which I know we've only even touched on the ceremonies that you've been through and the therapy that you've been through. What started to shift, though, in your relationship with him as you started to heal some of this? I asked you before you started healing, you said it was a little bit, almost like you were a little bit jealous of him. He gets to enjoy this and you don't. So how did things start to shift once you did sit with the medicine? And then obviously you have another kid comes along. But before that point, it's still just kind of you and your son and you're starting off on this path. What was that like?
Dude, I don't want to church this up to like make it sound like I'm a used car salesman or something, but that from that day forward, my intentions, I can't remember them specifically, but I know one of them was to stop allowing my past life to rob me of my present. Like I said, these constant moments of joy were being robbed by just memories and flashbacks from the past. Have you seen that movie, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
No.
Okay, I'll spare you the details then. But I stopped having flashbacks like that day. Like all the terrible memories went away. Like, I mean, they didn't go away. They're still there. Like, I can remember them. But they're not triggered by things that used to trigger them, like lights buzzing or loud noises or smells or special moments with my kid. Like all that stuff kind of went to the wayside, and I stopped having these like incredible painful flashbacks. They were gone, like next day, done. So I was able to be present for the first time in my child's life. Um, and that was amazing. And that was like really the catalyst, was the ability to like be in the here and now and not living in an alternate place, really. You know, like my wife would be like, fucking hello, like, is anybody home? Like, are you there? And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, sorry. Like, we're out playing in the yard, but me, you know, I'm in a bathroom, you know, being sexually abused in a group home. It's the weirdest shit, dude. That all went away. So being able to just be present was just amazing, right? To like witness, and but then also painful, because now you have to learn how to be a dad.
Your son, I mean, when you started this, he would have been too young to really notice anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's always an interesting thing to me, is like when somebody's older kids and they start on this path, is like the things that their family notices changing about them. But your son probably didn't really recognize too much of that thing. So your wife did, though, right? But when you say now you had to actually learn how to be a father, what do you mean by like, oh shit, now I have to be changing the diapers and I have to be present with his needs and responding to his needs? Like, what did that transition look like for you? What do you mean?
I think the first part about being a good father is being a good husband. And I realized for a long time I was not a good husband. Um, so I kind of started there, and that trickled into learning how to respond when he was crying, you know, rather than being triggered by some memory or feeling shitty, like nobody came to pick me up when I cried. I'm like, oh, he's crying. Go love on him, you know? And I think that was like the first one to learn how to nurture somebody who is suffering in a way, or they don't have words, they can't communicate, right? You don't know what he wants. And, and I think that there was huge, just to learn how to nurture somebody who needed that love from a father. Like I didn't fucking have it. And I think it's something that becomes ingrained in you. And I knew I wanted to be a dad. I was so excited to have a son, but I wasn't prepared for what it was about to force me to do. That was to look at the man in the mirror and come to terms with things that I don't like and things that need to change. And it just was constant growth, and has been constant growth since then.
Did you find that came naturally to you once you had the capacity for it, like that nurturing, or
No,
did
no,
you
and I
share
don't
how
think
hard it
it's
was for you to like accept this love as a kid?
no, I don't think it still comes naturally. Not that I have to like force it, but I have to like. Sometimes kids cry, and you're like, "The fuck are you crying about, dude? Like, come on." You know what I mean? Like my kid cried himself to sleep last night, and I had a moment of realization where I kind of chuckled. And before, it would have really fucked me up, because I remember being his age and like crying for my mom. Like, I want my mom, I want my mom, I want my mom, like screaming. He's pissed because he wanted to watch a movie, you know? And I'm just kind of like, I'm just like, dude, I used to cry like this for real shit, dude. Like, you know, and before, it would have really made me kind of like go into the rabbit hole of like, man, I used to cry myself to sleep for my
Yeah.
mother like this in a group home, and nobody would come, and blah, blah, blah. And here I am, like, just, I got my daughter in one arm, she's knocked out. My son is over here in my other arm, just fucking wailing, you know? And it's not a natural feeling to like, every bit of me wants to just jump up and get out of there, right? But knowing like he needs you right now, you know, like he's having a hard time regulating. and he needs to get this shit out of his body, get this energy out, and he needs to do it before he falls asleep and just toughen it out. Like I don't think it's natural for any father to like hear that sort of shit and go running to it, and like, I'm going to nurture you. Like, it takes a lot of discipline and selflessness to sit through a tantrum like that.
Maybe disagree. Maybe that's like your personal experience and my personal experience because we have very fucking different
Yeah.
backgrounds. But
Well, wait till she's
so I can
4.
appreciate that that's like,
Wait till she's 4 and she's screaming her fucking head off at bedtime because she didn't get a second cookie. And you're gonna remember this conversation.
yeah,
Be
that's
like, yeah, dude, this is natural feeling is to run. you know.
that's fair.
But yeah,
Did you find it was any different?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, no.
I was going to ask if you found it any different having a girl versus having a boy. And granted, you've now got 2 more years of fatherhood experience and 2 more years on the healing path and everything. But did you find anything that was kind of like naturally different when she popped out versus when he popped out?
Yeah, dude, it's a different role, right? My job
Mm.
as a father raising a young man is to raise exactly that, a young man. I'm building a man. I'm building somebody who's going to treat women with respect, who's going to open doors for people, who's going to be kind, who's going to listen, who's going to be helpful. And that's easy, right? Like, not easy, but it's not as hard as becoming a man that is going to now set an example to what your daughter should look for in a man when it is time for her to marry up and have a family. So the first person she's ever going to fall in love with, first man she's ever going to fall in love with is me. I don't want her to fall in love with the fucking piece of shit dad who's checked out and living a reckless life and yelling at mom, like that still comes out. Like, well, I'm not perfect, we have our moments, but I had to really check that, and be aware of that. Like, the first man she's ever going to fall in love with is me, and I better set a damn good example. I'm a good man, right? I've always been a good man since in my adult years. I've always been one to help people, show respect, talk kindly to others. I've also been somebody who's been incredibly violent and done horrible fucking things, some justifiable and some not, right? I think raising those values into, not that I'm going to teach my kid to be a violent menace, but to stick up for himself and have these characteristics as a good man who has backbone and moral compass and value. Like, I already know that, right? I've lived it. I already understand that I had great men in my life growing up and still do. Like, the caliber of men that I surround myself with are like the best of the best. Dude, I just have the most amazing friends. And for me to now implement that and to teach my son that, like, we went out for ice cream the other day. He's 4 years old and he's holding the door for people. That's easy. But to show my daughter what a good husband looks like, you know what I mean? And how a man should talk to his wife and apologize to her and show affection and show certain types of love. That has been incredibly difficult because that takes now creating this new version of myself, which my wife deserves tremendously. Not that I've been a piece of shit to her, but I haven't been, it's hard to say, but I haven't been the man that I would want my daughter to bring home to me, and that's accountability there. Like, and becoming that version is where the fucking work comes in.
Yeah, man, and that's a hard thing to admit to yourself. That like, I went through a lot of this when when my wife was pregnant. I did a lot of different ceremonies, a lot of temazcals, a lot of peyote, because that's what I had on hand.
Yeah.
Because I realized that the person who I had been up to that point was not it was not the man that I wanted to be as a father. And like I knew that a lot of things had to change. I'm still working on that. That's a difficult thing to admit to yourself. Um, to use our cop out, dude. You did the best you could with the tools you had,
That's
and now you're
not
doing
true.
better.
I'm learning more tools, dude. Like, you know what I mean? If
Well,
I
that's right.
did
You're
the
doing
best
better
yeah,
now.
if I did the
Yeah.
best I did with the tools, I'd still be like living this program of coming home shit faced and like wife having to apologize or apologizing to my wife for shit I don't remember, or you know what I mean? Or just like
Yeah, but now you got better tools.
exactly, I got better tools. I didn't cop out. You know.
So tell me more about your wife, actually, because you said you met her when you were like
Yeah,
17,
we met young,
right? And
so
so she's seen every iteration of you.
dude, I don't know what the fuck she stuck around for, dude. Honest to God, like couldn't I couldn't tell you, man. I mean, I'm average looking. I'm not fucking rich. I don't have a bunch of money. We've had a tremendous amount of fun. We laugh together a lot. But she's amazing, dude. She is an absolute angel in my life. Like you said, she's been there and held me up through so much, especially that, dark night of the soul when things kind of all came to a boil. But we met at a Halloween party when I was 17. I was like maybe 18 years old. She came to a Halloween party dressed as a cop of like all things, ironically. And I just was like absolutely blown away. Like she was just beautiful, she was absolutely beautiful. She didn't give me the time of day. Like I tried to introduce myself to her and her friend. She came with her friend Dana and another friend. And she started coming around. My roommate Ryan had like a big crush on her, like would write her poetry and shit. And we started hanging out and dude, like she had three older brothers and knowing now, like her like really knowing her brothers well and seeing kind of how she was raised. Not similar to me, but her brothers are her one brother in particular is like fucking like twin, dude. It's insane. Just wild boys, so she saw that in me, I think, and we were really able to get along. We had so much fun together, dude. She loved me for who I was, and it was the first time I had never dated through high school. I didn't have any girlfriends. I'd occasionally like make out with a chick at a party or whatever, but I wasn't out having sex and doing all that shit that kids were doing. And I lost my virginity when I was like 13 years old in a very awkward way. And then the next time I had sex, I was like 17. And then I met, Kim, and she's been who I've been with ever since then. So I wasn't someone to like really date. Didn't really like. I like chicks. Chicks like me. I just had no. I'd rather go ride dirt bikes with the boys and go surf. And fucking hear some girl bullshit. I remember all through high school, guys would like have a girlfriend. They'd disappear. There goes your friend. You don't see him anymore.
Yeah.
And then they break
Yeah.
up 17 times in 1 year. And you're just like, I wanted nothing to do with that. So when I met her, it was the first time I had uh, a female companion in that capacity that I was able to kind of open up and share my life with, and kind of let her know why I was who I was, But I I had a really strange relationship with alcohol. I was like the drunkest guy at every party. I don't like to drink beer. I prefer liquor. Um, I wasn't like my dad to where like this evil person came out, but what came out was like a wildly violent fucking maniac, just a fucking maniac, man. And I wasn't violent, like, oh, there's some poor guy, I'm gonna go bully him. It's like, you go out to bars, there's always somebody that deserves an ass whooping. You can find them anywhere in the world you go out. There's some fucking asshole out there who's roofing girls or whatever they're doing. But I would always seem to find them. I was like a shit magnet. Anytime I'd go out, there was trouble that would come my way. And she witnessed a lot of that, you know. And I mean, shit, dude. One time she had to come pick me up from jail when I told you I had to call my grandfather to bail me out. And he said no. She picked me up from jail that morning at 5 a.m. Santa Ana. Had to drive me to Santa Barbara 3 hours away because I had a court date in Santa Barbara County for a drunken public. So I was constantly drinking, and trouble was like a common denominator, you know. And we broke up, and I went to Santa Barbara for a weekend to visit some friends, met some chick there, ended up moving into her apartment. Lived together for a little while. It was kind of a relationship based on partying and just convenience. You know, I needed a place to stay. She was willing. And we had a lot of fun. And then I had a wedding to go to. My cousin Garrett was getting married to one of Kim's best friends, who actually was at that Halloween party. And so I went to the wedding. I was a groomsman. She was a bridesmaid. And we ran into each other at the wedding. And there was tension, right? She took my glasses off of my face and like broke them on the ground. And I was like, oh, she still loves me. Like, she wouldn't do that if she was over me, you know? I was like, yeah, I still got it. And
That's awesome.
it was an interesting night, you know. Got drunk, did a bunch of blow, fucking woke up, passed out on the garage floor of my friend's house in a torn tuxedo. And I was like 23 by now, 23, 24, still very much fucking wild, right? And I went back to Santa Barbara. My girlfriend was at work. I called Kim and I was like, hey, would you like to give it another go and try to make things work? And she said, yeah. She's like, yeah. I was like, cool. My car's in impound. Can you come pick me up? And and she's like, yeah, I'll come pick you. And she drove up, and I left. I'm the biggest piece of shit in the world for this. I never spoke to that girl again. She was at work. I didn't say bye. I packed my stuff, and I fucking
That's
split
awesome.
and totally ghosted this girl. And I feel really bad about it now. I hope I didn't damage her too much. But I'm sure she was able to get over me. And so I moved back to Orange County. I moved in with my grandparents for a little while. Went back to work. Got in an altercation at work, and got in a kind of a. I ended up in the hospital. I got cut really bad on my arm. And I can see this big old scar, but I all of it. But anyways, I almost bled to death. I got pushed out a window right before in an altercation with the owner of the company I was working for, and I ended up with a settlement from a lawsuit that occurred through that. It wasn't a bunch of money, but it was enough to get an apartment and buy some furniture, and I did. So we got our first apartment. We moved in together when we were, I don't even know, probably 24, 25, somewhere around there. And the rest is history. You know, we moved out and started our life together, and it was still chaos. Like, I was still in the partying and didn't do as much heavy drugs. Every once in a while, if well, I was at a party, I'd, partake, but it wasn't like a big part of my life anymore. But alcohol very much was. Um, Alcohol and motocross were like the two things that I would do more, more than everything, and then surf. And all of them led to injuries, and problems, which ended up developing into an opiate problem eventually, from sports injuries. But we started this life together, man, and we started traveling, seeing the world. We'd go to Costa Rica, Thailand, Mexico, just kind of go all over the place. And I had a good job. Eventually, we bought a house together, and then got married. And still, I was slowly growing up, right? Like, I wouldn't drink as often, but I would still drink and get hammered and go ride my dirt bikes and ride motorcycles and do dumb shit. Eventually got tied in with some organized crime stuff that we can touch on later. But we got married and then moved to Northern California a few years after that. And I had a really bad motorcycle accident where she had begged me like not to leave the house. I was just going down the road to go fishing on a creek, but I had been drinking all day long. She didn't feel good about it. I was trying to leave my house without a helmet, and she begged me like, please don't go. Like, she was in tears in my yard begging me not to leave. And I was like, I'm leaving. You're not going to stop me. And she's like, at least put a fucking helmet on. She put a helmet on me. And I wasn't like, I don't know what your relationship is with alcohol, but if you were to like pound a bottle of vodka in a couple of hours, you'd be fucking hammered, falling over drunk. But if you drink a bottle of vodka throughout the whole day, you kind of have this baseline of like, I'm fine, right? And I probably would have been fine had I not blown a tire out going down the road. And I blew the tire out, and I high-sided my bike into an oak tree at like 50 miles an hour. And fucking collapsed my lung. My spleen swelled up to where they were worried I was going to have to rupture it. I broke like my sternum, all these bones in my sternum had like, I almost fucking died. I was in the
But
hospital.
for the helmet you were wearing.
Yeah, I didn't strap it, and it flew off of my fucking
Oh.
head, but it did probably save me. I hit my body like on the tree, so I like smacked it sideways. But yeah, I was collapsed lung. My spleen's ready to fucking explode. I was like, she ended up driving afterwards after me, like, I don't really know why. She came after me and found me on the side of the fucking road, blood coming out of my mouth.
Damn.
And I wanted to go. I was like, I remember everything like clear as day, excuse me. And I was like, I just want to go home and take a nap. Like, the fuck this, let me go take a nap. She's like, we're going to the hospital. So she just beelined it. And we have a hospital close. But she took me further to a trauma center. And she don't know shit about medical. Like, didn't know anything about what my injuries were. But I get to the hospital and my heart rate is like 40 beats a minute. And my oxygen is like fucking 60%. And I'm dying. I'm legitimately like, they're like, dude, you're about to fucking die. And they gave me a shot of something, and the doctor takes his fucking scalpel, like, dude, like, not even in an operating room or nothing. Like, they came in, they grabbed me. I remember when I walked into the hospital, they grabbed me and like took me back. And I've been in the emergency room a lot in my life, and usually I'll sit there for hours. So I must have been in bad shape, or there was just angels looking out for me that day. But they grabbed me, they took me back there, they put the O2 sensor on there, they put the heart monitor on, and I could see my shit, and I was like, this is wild. And doctor comes in, he takes a scalpel, and he cuts me like right here, and then he stabs his hemostats through my fucking ribs, and it's all. You could hear it like you shook up a beer and like cracked a beer, and it was all. And then you could see my heart rate like slowly start to increase, and then I was out. I fucking went out. And I woke up the next day in the hospital with a catheter in me and fucking hooked to all these machines. I had a chest tube in. And that was the day my relationship with alcohol changed. It was like crazy, and it wasn't even anything that like I intentionally like had to like work on, like, oh, I can't drink anymore, you know, like, I gotta go to meetings or whatever. It was just like that chapter had closed. I still drink. couldn't tell you I could tell you the last time I got drunk was the day my brother died. I got fucking wasted. Which I think that's what you're supposed to do, right? Um, but that day, my relationship with alcohol changed, and my relationship with my wife started to really improve, to the point where now she wants to have kids, and we have this beautiful family and a wonderful life together. But she's amazing, dude. She's beautiful. She's like half English, half Chamorro, which is Guam. Her mom's Guamanian. So she's dark complexion, dark hair. Like she looks like an islander, and my kids are like these little Aryan babies with blonde hair and blue eyes, like running around. It's so cool. People are like, our daughter actually had one black hair growing out of her head the other day, and I'm like, look, she's got one black hair, like mom, hilarious. But she's just amazing, man. She's very grounded. You can sway her into doing something that doesn't align with who she is. She knows who she is, and she is very strong in that. I'm not saying that she's not one to learn and evolve, but she has morals and moral value, and you'll never get her to go on either side of those. She's very straight shot, and just such an amazing mother. She is like, dude, mom's put in work. Like there's always this stigma of like, oh, the dad goes out and makes a living and he busts his ass so the wife can stay home and fucking chill with the kids, dude. She works a million times harder than I do any day of the week raising the babies. And she's doing a bang up job at it. She's outstanding. And I'm so incredibly grateful that she's foolish enough to ride with me for the last 20 years, 20, yeah, I met her in 2004. 21 years.
I bet she felt, well, I'm sure she felt a lot of things that day, but then afterwards, very fucking vindicated in telling you to not get on that motorcycle.
I definitely,
I would never stop bringing that up.
yeah, I definitely listened to her intuition. Like,
Yeah.
how are you feeling about this, babe? Maybe if I was better at her listening to her when it came to finances and things like that, we'd probably still some growth there. But definitely when it comes to like, hey, should I go skydiving or go surf these big swell? I'm gonna listen for sure.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb. Listen to your wife's intuition on things. Man, dude, how would you feel if we put a pin in things there?
I'm
Because I
good
feel
with
like we
it.
covered a lot of shit about you. And I do want to do a round two sometime and hear about some more of your experiences on the facilitator side of things, working with Jared and other people that you've worked with, and kind of the stuff that you've seen um, in other people's ceremonies, how that's affected you, how that community has affected you. And then maybe we can get into some more of the fun stories of your criminal background to whatever degree you want to next
Only
time.
a criminal if I got caught.
Is that That's right, dude. We'll see what the statute of limitations is on certain things that we could do around 3 at some point in the
Yeah,
future. Does that sound fair to you?
yeah, we could keep depending whatever you got. I mean, I'm good on time, so if you want to keep rolling, I'm cool. But if you want to jam, that's fine too. We already banged 2 hours. So.
Yeah, no, I think let's wrap it up here, and then we can kind of debrief and see what other things that we want to hit on, and come back to this with some fresh eyes and some fresh ears next time.
Cool, I'm down with
All right,
that. That sounds great.
and a better fucking internet connection on my part.
Yeah, same here too. I'm
Um,
surprised
before
mine
we
hasn't shit out.
Yours is solid, but before we hit stop, any kind of last thoughts or any kind of like, fucking Tim Ferriss always asks this question of like, what would you put on a billboard? I'm not going to ask you that, but like, what kind of stuff do you wish that people knew about the medicine work? Because you do see all kinds of people coming through the retreats and on social media and all this kind of stuff. What do you wish that people understood a little bit better, maybe about what's out there or preparing for it or integrating afterwards? Um, yeah, what kind of message would you have for somebody who's listening to this and is like, oh shit, this sounds like something that I could use, or this sounds like it would benefit me? What kind of stuff would you tell those people?
Man, that's a tough question because I have strong feelings about this, especially now being in the facilitator role. Um, I think the best thing I could, if I were to put it on a billboard and people knew about plant medicine and psychedelics, I would say journey less, integrate more. And I see so many
Like
people,
that. I like that as a billboard.
right? And I see so much of this like constant. Did ayahuasca last month, and I'm doing MDMA next month, and then Wachuma, and like, and they're not changing any of their habits in life. Like this isn't psychedelics isn't a fucking magic pill to where you're going to take MDMA and your life is forever changed in a moment. No, it allows you to process and deal with things from your past or present and allow you now to develop a framework to integrate into new habits and shining a light onto these areas of your life that need work. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was embark down this journey of healing. The MDMA was a very small piece of the puzzle. So for people who were like looking for a quick solution, there isn't one. You know, it is all work. No matter, it's all work if you take it seriously, and you really do. And if people aren't taking this type of work seriously, that's fine. You can go do ayahuasca for fun. You can go do those things for a good time and for like a check-in and enlightenment. But if you're doing it to kind of unfuck your life, of a lifetime of shit or a career worth of trauma and stacking bodies or being first responder and having to deal with all that loss and chaos that goes on with that, you need to take it like it's the most serious mission of your life. And then the magic can happen. Like if people are getting out of the military, like treat this as a last deployment and how you're going to train for a deployment and know your tools, know your weapons, know the people next to you, like as well as possible before you go run that mission. And a lot of people will just like get the call of, hey, there's a psilocybin container in fucking Wyoming. It's $2,800. Food's paid for. And they show up and they have like a crazy, you know, blissful epiphany there, and then they go back to their fucking dumb, shitty life where they hate their wife and they're, smacking their kids around because they just left a long shift at the jail and there's no integration done. I could do a whole podcast on this.
We shall next time, man. For right now, I like that. Journey less, integrate more. I'm putting that on a fucking t-shirt, dude. Paul, thank you very much, man. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing this stuff. Thanks for dealing with the internet issues. And I look forward to part 2. All right. that's it for this one. Hopefully, you could suffer through some of the audio issues and everything like that. But man, what a journey Paul has had, and I cannot overstate that message that he shared at the end enough. I love that so much. When he said, journey less, integrate more, like I couldn't have possibly said that better myself. That is a fucking t-shirt that I want to make. And really, that is what our mindful microdosing program is all about. It is all about that process of integration. And honestly, that's something that you can do. You can integrate without ever having had that big psychedelic experience in the first place. In fact, in like the truest Jungian sense of the word, integration is just about becoming whole again. That's really all that that word means. And so you don't need to have 5 grams of mushrooms to go integrate. You don't have to go do MDMA. You don't have to go to an ayahuasca retreat. You can start integrating all of those parts of yourself, all of those shadow parts of yourself, all of those younger parts of yourself, that inner child that's probably wounded in some way. You don't need a big medicine experience to start doing that. So I really love that that was Paul's takeaway, or that was Paul's like ending message to everybody. Journey less, integrate more. And if you need help doing that, that's literally exactly what we are here for. So reach out to us. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to this one. Until next time, peace out. Hare Krishna.